Hi guys, welcome to Investing with JYK, and today we'll dig even further into the on GSH. So what I'm trying to do on this video is to see if there's anything that we can learn from the Japanese history that might apply to the way China might go about developing their whole railway infrastructure. So Japan's quite famous for their on-time trains and being both efficient and actually profitable. So both JR, so all the JRs are profitable, and they always return about 10% of their equity. So what can China borrow from that, and what might the Chinese government do? So here is an article written by this Mitsuhide in 1997, 10 years after the privatization. So let's just look at this and see if there's any similarities, and then we'll span out from there. So in the 50s, right after the war, most of the passenger transport was done by train, and they essentially started to build highways, and then the car ownership started to grow, and then they started to they had this Japan National Railway Corporation, very similar to CRC, the China Railway Corporation, and they used to be called the Chinese Railway Department. It was a department of the government. So Japan started Shinkansen in 1964. That's the high-speed train, right? So 1964, when they first had the high-speed rail, let's see, the first high-speed rail in China was, when was that? Let's see. I think this is like late 2000, early 2000 actually. The first one. Technology transfer, corruption, history, early planning. They had 6 speed up campaigns, I remember that. So the first one, here. Guangzhou Railroad. See that's the first one to become a high-speed train, 160 kilometers an hour, and that was 2000. So that's about 20 years ago, 19 years ago. Okay, the first ever high-speed train. And let's go back here. So after that, it had a booming period, and then that's the year that JNR entered the red. That's when they started losing money, and guess what? The CRC is losing money, and I'm sure they were losing money when they were investing. Even now, they're still losing a bit of money, but not too much. They get government subsidies every year that actually more than compensates for. Okay, so the two things they could do, they could either increase fares or reduce staff through automation. So they didn't do that, and then air started competing. they did introduce some automation, but not too much. They reduced their labor tiny bit, like single digits, low single digits every year through retirement, basically, and not hiring as much. And they started losing massive amount of money, 1 trillion yuan per year. So what is 1 trillion yuan? Divided by 100, you get dollars. So 100 billion a year. That's a lot more than the Chinese are losing at that point. So they said the deficit reached 25 trillion yen in 1987, the year of privatization in Japan. And that is massive. I don't remember the exchange rate, but the exchange rate has been between like 100 and 200 US dollar to $1. So you're looking at about 100 to 200 100 to 200 1 trillion. Okay, so divided by the 1 trillion, you're looking at divided by 100, you're looking at $10 billion, not $100 billion. Right, so that this thing is about 100 to 200 billion dollars in deficit. What they mean by deficit, I'm not quite sure. It could be the accumulated loss, or I don't think it's the 1 year loss. It's probably the accumulated loss, $100 billion. That is a huge amount. And then they privatized JNR. They split into 6 or 7 divisions. In Honshu, the largest island, if you look at Japan, it is actually quite relevant how these splits happen and which ones are publicly traded now. Right, so in Japan, you got, come on, bear with me, I am in China, and then this thing will load as my VPN pleases. Go! Damn you. Anyway, while this is loading, Honshu is the largest island of Japan, and it includes all the industrial areas like Osaka, Nagoya, and Tokyo. Osaka and Kobe, I'm considering to be the same region. They're so close together, right? So they split that, and then they had Shikoku, and then they had Kyushu, and they had Hokkaido. So JR was split. Now, 5 of them are public, I think. You got the Kyushu one public. You got the West, they call it JR West, that was public. JR Central, that's public. And JR East, that's public. All of them are making money. So JR Central is serving Nagoya and the surrounding areas. JR East is serving Tokyo and everything above. And Japanese have their weird east-west thing. So it's, for us, it's more like north-south. But they just call it west and east, even though it's kind of same thing, because Japan is really like this shape. Anyway, Kyushu is public as well, with a very low return on equity, and you will see that pattern very soon. And Shikoku is losing a little bit of money, and Hokkaido is losing quite a bit of money. And why is that? So Honshu is more industrialized, more urban, more dense in population. As you moved to Kyushu, it's still relatively populated. And Shikoku, this island here, is less populated, and Hokkaido is the least populated area of Japan. It's very much to the north, very cold, it snows every year, so all these tracks gets messed up by the snow, the ice, and all that stuff. So high maintenance, few people doesn't make good business for a railway. Okay, so that's what then happened, and so that they kept doing that, and they split the debt between them. So Hokkaido bore no debt. Shigoku, I think, bore no debt as well. The government took 27 trillion in debt, and the rest, they racked up 36 trillion yen in debt, and then that was split between the JRs in Honshu. So probably the one in Kyushu as well. So that was what happened in Japan. And if you think about the timeline, since the introduction of the first Shinkansen, the first high-speed rail, it was 23 years after that. So from 64 to 87, right? So it's 23 years after that. They had a huge amount of debt, while CRC had a huge amount of debt. In terms of size of debt, they were 36 trillion yen, and which is quite a lot. In China, CRC has 4 something trillion yuan in debt. So for CNY to JPY, I know the exchange rates would be different, but let's just take a look. It's 67. It will be 67 trillion yen equivalent, but that was in 1980s. Now it's in 2019, so the inflation has eaten away a lot of that. So I would say probably somewhat similar. Both JNR and CRC are losing money, and it seems like both are trying to privatize their operations and breaking it up. So one thing that I was looking at, do I still have it? Too many tabs open. So there was a piece of news. Why is this thing so dark? Okay. Here we go. So this happened. Hold on. Yeah, okay. So they split. So this is now a group, right? So this is the Chinese National Railway Group. And then that got, well, I know most of you can't read Chinese, but essentially they're trying to split it into, where is this? So the 18 railway bureaus, these are almost provincial government agencies for railway development, is now reformed into group limited corporations, and they're now how would you call this? They're now managed by a legal person, or there's a concept of a legal person in China. So that is done, or being done, already done. And then they're cutting staff, because with the government, a government, they always have more people than they need, because that's just the way it is. And now let's think about what happened to the JRs. So remember, JR Hokkaido isn't profitable now. JR Shigoku is not profitable now. Kyushu, West, Central, and East are all profitable, and these are all urbanized areas. So what about Guangshen Railroad? If China follows the path of the Japanese, what would happen is probably CRC gets broken up, becomes a few public entities, because China's bigger, probably a few more public entities than Japan had. I'm guessing 18, since they had 18 bureaus. Seems like a natural split. But GSH is in the most industrialized area of China. Well, not the most, but like one of the top two, right? You're either here or here. These are the two areas where you have all the industries and all the high tech, all the finances, and everything. So just as a background, near Shanghai is mostly port plus finance plus some tech plus some manufacturing, like shipbuilding. These two cities, Wuxi and Suzhou, used to be mostly manufacturing, but now they have some tech and entertainment industry there. And Hangzhou, where I'm from, is getting, it used to be obviously manufacturing, because that's where everything started, but now mostly high tech. And they still have some manufacturing, like the biggest, or I would say the best boiler is built in this city for power stations and all that. So in here, you've got manufacturing around here, you've got all the tech manufacturing around here, and you got all the tech here, and then you have all the finances in Hong Kong, and you have bunch of ports in here, and a bunch of ports in near Guangzhou. So, and this is where Gree is from, the air conditioner manufacturer. So yeah, so it has almost everything within a range of 150 kilometers. So I'm guessing all the railroads will be very profitable in this area, and then GSH occupies exactly between Guangzhou and Shenzhen. And yes, at the moment, the ROE is ridiculously low at 2% probably, but I think that's not normal, and that would change given more privatization. At the moment, the chairman the chairman of the board is appointed by the parent company, being Guangzhou Railroad Corporation or something like that, which is 100% controlled by CRC. But once that is split out, I'm sure further privatization will bring more incentivized management. And one example that you can see how incentivized management changed the whole picture is China Unicorn. It started producing huge profits since, here we go. Right, so blah 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 blah, but essentially they started making a lot of money once they introduced more private private ownership. So yeah, that's mostly macro history stuff around Japan. See how much of that might be applied to China. Oh, and another thing, 1987 is when Japan had its privatization. 1987 is when Japan had, well, this is when they had the bubble, really. But before that, you can see this growth is kind of weird, right? That's when they entered the bubble territory. But 1985-ish, Japan had 10,000-ish USD in GDP, and at the moment, China has 9,000. So Japan had 11,000 and China had like 9,000. It's very close. So I think Japan and China are in very similar situations in their path towards being a developed economy. There are actually a lot more things that are in common, and yeah. So I think one can borrow a lot from what the Japanese did right and wrong, and I'd probably make a new video later on the similarities between the two countries in terms of their path to modernization and development. But I would say that coastal China will be very similar to Japan, and not just coastal China, anything along the Yangtze River, and large railway trunks. They're going to be similar to what Japan is, but inner China, so anywhere around here, is going to be pretty poor, and northern China is going to be pretty poor as well. So those might not apply, but anywhere near the coast or near the two rivers should do okay. One river goes something like that, the other river goes something like that. Don't challenge me on my geography. I haven't refreshed my memory for long, but a lot of things will be similar, and hopefully we can look at Japan and invest in China, and maybe later we can look at China and invest in some of the other countries like Vietnam, or hopefully even Burma. All right, that's it, and see you next time.